looks like. All right. This is what it formally, our reading passage formally looks like. So by looking at our, what do you call it? Our headings, Edgar Allan Poe, early career, okay. We have mysteries and poems, and a mystery unsolved. What do we think our reading is going to be about? Just by looking at our headings, what do we think the mystery is going to be about? Death. All right, death is going to be in there. Okay. Maybe murder with our mysteries or mystery unsolved. That's a good idea. Okay, so we're getting his very dark words. But what is career? Has anybody heard the word career before? No? So Karen, you said you've heard career. What is a career? Or anybody can help. Something you want to do, yes. So a career is like a job. Or like his jobs. So early might be his first jobs. Okay, so we're going to learn about Edgar Allan Poe, who we've been talking about. What do we know about Edgar Allan Poe? Type in the chat box, guys. What do we know about Edgar Allan Poe? Ooh, I rhymed. He's a writer. Okay. He's a poet. He likes death. I can't write with this thing. Okay, so we're going to learn about him, look about his first jobs, his famous terror novels. Absolutely. We watched the video about the very first mystery. Oops, wrong thing. The very first mystery. We read or watched 2 of his poems, The Raven and Annabel Lee. And then clearly there's a mystery that people still have. We still have a mystery about Edgar Allan Poe. Okay. If I look at the pictures, I see what he looks like. What does this picture tell me? Under early career, what does this picture tell me? All right, it could be his school. So again, this is, or his job where he worked. It could be maybe a hotel. It could be his house. So we're going to read, but this is probably, since it's his early job, maybe it's where he works or where he lives, right? And I'm sure we will read more about that in here. So it could be where he lives or where he works. All right, his mystery and poem, we have another picture. What is that? What is this picture under mysteries and poems? It is a raven. A raven is a type of bird for his very famous poem. And now the mystery unsolved, there's a picture of his gravestone. So what do we think the mystery might be in this section? If I have a picture of his gravestone, what might the mystery be? To see how he died. Good. And we watched the video, the biography about Edgar Allan Poe. And we know that he stumbled around and died mysteriously. So we're going to read about his mysterious death. All right, excellent. What does this chart, and let me zoom in. Let me click that. At the very bottom, what does this chart tell me? This chart right here. what does this chart tell me? Okay, his stories and poems. Is it all of his stories and poems, do we think? Thank you, Karen. So famous, these are his popular stories and poems. Do we think that it's all of them or only some of them? No. Why do we think that? Why do we think it's some? I agree. Why do we think it's some? And you guys can talk to me or you can type. Why do we think it's some of his works and not all of it? All right, good. At the top, it says his most famous works. So it's only his most famous, not all of his stuff. I like that, okay? And we watched The Raven. We watched Annabelle Lee. We watched The Murders of the Rue Morgue. And we watched The Telltale Heart. So there are so many more stories and poems that are famous, okay? So if I'm interested, if I like Edgar Allan Poe, I can always look at this and Google more of his stories or his poems so I can watch or read them. Okay? All right, wonderful. Notice they are in quotation marks. They are in quotation marks. We do that with our titles because it is the name of a story or the name of a poem. Since it is the name, we put them in quotes. Sometimes you see books that are underlined, okay? There is one other thing that this chart tells us. What is in the parentheses? The year. The year what? Why do they have a year next to a story? Is there? Yes, and Karen, I was just going to ask. That is one of our vocab words, published. So remember, you can write a story or write a poem, but until it is published or put out to the public so people can buy it and read it, okay, that is what these dates are. So this tells us when he wrote it. So the year tells us when it was published. And I love the use of the vocab word. Thank you, Miss Chrissy. Okay, when it was published. All right, so there's a lot of information in our pictures and in our headings. Okay, the mystery unsolved. Now, one other thing I want to bring up is in our story, we are going to see some italic or slanted words. Like this one. And I can't get any closer, I am sorry. So in my sentence, during this time, he also published his first book of poetry titled Tamerlane at the age of 18. What does titled mean? Does anyone know what a titled means? Okay. The name of something. Karen, you are on fire today. All right. So it is the name. So titled, an apology for how slow I am writing, okay? The name of something is the title, okay, or title. So when we see something in italics, I know you were with it. When you see something in italics or it is slanted, and I say italics because that's why it's the I up here. It's called italics. Okay. When I see something slanted or in italics, that means it is the name of something. And they gave us the context clue, which we looked at in our warm-up. Context clue, I look around it and see the word titled. which I know is name. Okay. So, do I have any other? I see quotation marks in this one. And we looked in that, so I see quotation marks, the murders of the Rue Morgue. So even though it's not in italics, it's not slanted, it is still the name of a story. And I know that because of my chart. Okay. I know that because of the name of my chart. Okay. So wonderful. I think those are the ones that I wanted to talk about with you guys. So now let's go to Canvas and look at our text structure. So now we're looking for our first, second. What happens next? Okay. When do things happen? So if everyone would please click the blue Google Doc, click the blue Google Doc under text structure sequence 11.6 and make a copy. We have typed out the story so that we can highlight it. So it is the same information. Now this one does not have the pictures because we're looking for our signal words. On Monday, when we do our first read, it will have the pictures. Okay? So this is just so we can see our text structure words. So I am going to actually click this off to the side to try and help me. Okay, so I want my highlight. So we're going to go get highlight. And you do not have to switch yours. This is up here so we can see our signal words. Okay, signal words. But I do want my story, and I'm going to get my highlight color. And I like yellow, but as long as it's bright, your color is okay. Do not highlight in black, even though that would be very Edgar Allan Poe. All right, so I'm going to do this first section. So I want you guys to watch and follow along with what I do, okay? So I'm looking for signal words. So I'm going to skim. And skim just means a fast read, okay? Fast read. So I'm looking for my signal words. First, second, next, on, a date, initially, finally, now, not long after, before, during, eventually, all of these. So Edgar Allan Poe was born in Massachusetts. Ooh, on January 19th. So on a date. So I'm going to highlight on a date. So I go to my highlight. Okay, so that tells me when something happened. Okay, was an infant, his mother died. So he was 2 years old. So when he was 2, something happened. So when he was 2, something happened. And just like what we were talking about, these are events. Something happened on this time. Orphaned at an early age, he was raised by his wife Frances. The Allens never legally adopted Edgar, but he took their surname. John Allen raised Edgar to follow in his footsteps, become a businessman. He sent him to the best schools. See, these don't give me a time. They just tell me what happened in his life. So I'm looking for when he had a time. He sent Poe to the best schools. Edgar attended the University of Virginia, where he did well academically. Yes, I'm going to do this first section. So watch the first section, and then you guys will highlight on yours. Okay, so watch me go through the first section. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you asked that question, Ephraim. The Allens, he sent Poe to the best schools. He left the school because of debts he incurred. He returned home to Richmond, but his relationship with John Allen was unhappy. While John Adams wanted Edgar to become a businessman, Edgar wanted to become a poet. So nothing really happened. It's just that people wanted something. He started writing as a child, and one of his teachers said to him, the boy was a born poet. Ooh, eventually. Eventually is on my list. Eventually means it finally happened. That is a good question, Karen. I'm not counting it as a year because being a child can be any year. We think of a child as someone who's probably under 13. Because when I start hearing 13, 14, 15, I think of teenager. Teenager for 13, 14, 15, 16. It's got teen. So a child I think of as 12 is younger. So it could be any time, but that's a great idea. I mean, it's a great thought. Okay, we just don't know when. So eventually though, so probably after being a child, okay, eventually is a signal word. It means the next event happened. Even got the word event in it. So eventually, and I'm going to highlight that, John Allen cut all ties to Edgar, and Edgar struck out on his own. He enlisted. Ooh, in a year is one of my dates, and we saw that in our paragraph yesterday. We saw lots of years. So in 1827, I'm going to highlight that because it tells me a year, and served 2 years. Okay. During this time, during time. So during that year, during that time while he's in the army, that tells me a time during this time. He also published his first book. Ooh, first. His first book. Okay, so I know his first book is during this time in 1827. Okay, so I'm kind of putting it all together. At the age of 18. After leaving the army, okay, so that's the next event. I see after. After here is a signal word for sequence. After leaving the army. Edgar entered, so I know my event. He continued to write and publish poetry, but at age 18. You're right. I missed that one. So yeah, because it does give him his age and we know when he was born, we could actually pinpoint the year that it is. So good. Karen, you want to teach my class today? You're so awesome. So yes, Karen brought up we should bring the age of 18 because we can go back since we have when he was born. We could do the math and figure out what year that is. What year is that? So 1809 plus 18. We got 720. 1827. So all of that. So we can double check. So during this time, we're still meaning 1827. And we can double check that by looking at the math. 1809 when he was born and 18. Okay. So I love it. After leaving the army, Edgar entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. He continued to write and publish poetry, but 8 months after entering West Point. So we know when he entered West Point. Okay, but 8 months later. So 8 months after. 8 months after. So I'm see my word after over here. And it gives me a date or a time. Edgar was thrown out of the academy in 1831. So in a date. So yesterday when we did our sequence and we put the events of the Edgar Awards in order, they were pretty easy to say. Everyone had a year. This one is a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more difficult. So that's why we are looking for our signal words. So if we are able to put Edgar Allan Poe's life in order. Okay. So let's look at early career. Let's look at early career. Oh, sorry. Take a minute on your Canvas, your Google Doc. Please highlight what I have. Please highlight what I have and then type done in the chat box so we can move on. Yes, highlight what I have. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mina Lise. Genesis. Susanna. Okay, Axel, Frank, Mario. Trying to see who else. John Danny. Make sure you tell me when you are done and I will move on to the early career section. And I'm going to ask for you guys to help me highlight our signal words. Okay, Axel and Frank, are we participating? Axel, I know you did our vocab. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Let me do. Sorry. All right, let's look at early career together, guys. So we're looking for any of our signal words for our sequence. That's okay, Frank. Keep going. Are you on this section, the last paragraph? Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. All right, for early career, and Ephraim, keep coming along with us, okay? I got to watch my time. Early career. Edgar was impoverished and decided to move to Baltimore, where he had relatives. He lived with his Aunt Maria Clem and her daughter Virginia. While living in Baltimore, I don't have while on here, but it does tell me while living there, he began publishing stories. So began means something happened. So even though it's not on my list right here, I'm going to highlight while living in Baltimore, Edgar began. Because that's telling me something started. Began means start. Okay, so that's why we're going to include that one in there. All right. So while living in Baltimore, Edgar began publishing short stories. One of his stories won a prize in a writing contest, and this helped him publish more of his work. All right, Ephraim, I'm going to scroll down a bit, but I'm going to leave that top one up there. He was offered an editorial position at a literary magazine in Richmond. So Richmond is a place. It is a place in Virginia, not a date. So even though I see in, does not count. All right, good. As a magazine editor, he honed his writing and editing skills. He made the Southern Literary Messenger, one of the most popular magazines with the stories, reviews, well-known literary critic. All right, by 1832, by a date is one of mine. So we're going to highlight by 1832. Edgar had published 3 books of poetry. His aunt and cousin moved to Richmond, and Poe married. So what should I highlight in this sentence? His aunt and cousin moved to Richmond, and Poe married Virginia Clem in 1836 when he was 27. All right, good. 1836, we want the in. We do want the in. It tells me the prepositional time phrase. So in 1827 when he was 1836 when he was 27. All right, good. His date and age. Excellent. All right. We do not highlight moved because we don't have a time. So a sequence word tells us when the next event happened. Decided to move where he lived in it. I think because we highlighted while living in Baltimore, that tells us that he moved to Baltimore. And then while he's in Baltimore, something started. Okay? Again, great questions. I love it. Okay. So now, oh, you're talking about this one. Now, hold on. Edgar moved to New York City to work as a magazine editor and to Philadelphia a year later. Which words in this sentence tell me time? Yes, Genesis, a year later. Now, if we were talking about the event, what happened a year later in probably a year later, so we can put things in order. So we just want to highlight a year later because they moved to Richmond, then the next event to New York City, and then a year later, Philadelphia. Okay. A year later, he was creating a name for himself as a writer and poet, but was still not making much money. He published his first book of short stories. Ooh, what should I highlight in that story or that sentence? He published his first book of short stories, The Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, which included The Fall of the House of Usher in 1840. We want our signal words, so look at our signal words. So definitely the year, 1840. So we definitely want in 1840. I'm going to add his first book of short stories. Okay, that's a big event. So his first book of short stories. Yes. Okay, I like that. But his payment was in 20 copies of the book, not in cash. Edgar wrote his famous stories and poems during the time he worked as an editor in New York City and Philadelphia. Is there anything I should highlight in this sentence, looking at our signal words? So Edgar wrote his famous stories and poems during the time he worked as an editor in New York City and Philadelphia. So does famous stories tell us when it happened? Remember, sequence is when. This is all about when. So no, it doesn't. So we're not going to highlight famous stories. So does it tell us a time or around a time that he wrote those famous stories? Is there a phrase that we see in our signal words? That is what I want, Karen. Okay? Exactly. During the time he worked as an editor in New York City. So during the time tells us when something happened. So if I were to list my event that he wrote famous stories, my time is when he was as an editor. Okay? So that's why we want that. All right, let's do the next section together, and then you guys will do the last one by yourself. All right, so take a minute. Make sure your Google Doc has these highlighted. Okay, you are going to submit and turn into Canvas for a grade. So please make sure that you highlight. Please tell me if you need me to go back up. Go up if you are missing something. And if you have any questions, please ask or type them. It'll take a minute. Make sure yours is highlighted. Scroll down. Highlight what I have highlighted on your Google Doc, Ephraim. You made a copy, right? So you're just highlighting what I have highlighted. All right, so Karen's moving on. Okay, so let's look at mysteries and poems together. We'll do that one together. So what should I highlight? Let's look at our first sentence. Yeah, I'll go up here. In 1841, Edgar published what is generally regarded as the world's first detective story. No. So we definitely want the date, as Karen mentioned, in 1841. Okay, 1841. All right. We don't need to go through what happened yet. We just want to look for our signal words to tell us the order. So yes, I would probably include first detective story because that is very important. It was the first story. And I like first as a signal word. Okay, when I see first, it tells me that's in order. Okay. In a detective story, the focus is on the analysis that solves the crime. In the Murders in the Rue Morgue, Edgar introduced a detective who uses deductive reasoning to solve the mystery of what happened to two women found dead in a locked room. Oh, we'll talk about that again. It is our vocabulary word. Poe set his story in Paris, France. Remember, so this is in Paris, France. Paris is a place. It's a place, so we're not going to highlight it. Paris Police Department was the first to employ scientific methods in solving crimes. Should I highlight anything? First. I'm going to highlight first if I come back and know that Paris Police were the first to use. We did an assignment on the scientific method. So we observe, we classify, we measure, we experiment, all of those. Poe's story focused on C. Auguste Dupin and how he solved this unsolvable mystery. C. Auguste Dupin went on to solve crimes in The Mystery of Marie Roget and The Purloined Letter about a stolen letter. These stories about C. Auguste Dupin served as models for later whodunits. I don't have later. Featuring detectives like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. Like Dupin, these fictional detectives use deductive reasoning and imagination to solve crimes. Readers learn the same clues that the detective does so they can match wits with the detective. Okay? Do we need to highlight anything else in this paragraph? Or are we good? I don't think so either. I think we're good. All right. The Raven, published in January 1845, is considered Edgar's greatest poem. What should I highlight in that sentence? The date. So we want in, because our signal word is in, and the date. So in January 1845. And please make sure that you are highlighting, oops, different color, highlighting with me. Okay. The first line of the poem. Even though it says first here, it's talking about the first in a poem. It's not something new that happened. So I'm not going to highlight first here. Okay, I had to look at the whole sentence. The first line of the poem gives readers a good idea of the mood. Once upon a midnight dreary while I pondered weak and weary. Edgar's fame increased after he published The Raven. He attracted large crowds to his lectures and began receiving better pay. What should I highlight in this last section? After. Thank you, Karen. That is one of my signal words over here. So make sure yours is highlighted, and this helps tell us the order or sequence of his life, of Edgar Allan Poe's life. And these are his stories. Because I picked the wrong color, I am sorry. There we go. It was just a mistake. What I would like for you to do is do the last section, and I want you to highlight the sequence words that you see in the last section, a mystery unsolved. So in these two paragraphs, I want you to do it on your own and highlight. Where is began? Is it in? Oh, go up, sorry. He started receiving. What do we think, guys? So after he published that, he began. Do you think began getting more money, better pay, goes with this event and after, or is it like a new event? So Karen, you think it goes with after the publishing? Since I think they go together, so I probably wouldn't highlight began. But if you do, it's not wrong. It just, these are connected. So after his fame, he also gets money. So that's the same event. Okay. So in these last couple minutes, guys, I would like you to highlight the signal words that you see in a mystery unsolved. This is what you are doing on your own, not me. Okay. So highlight and then click share. Ephraim, Frank. Yeah, Ephraim and Frank, I want you to share directly to me. Okay, when you are done. All right, everyone else, make sure you click share. Change link to Lee County Schools. Copy link, and you will submit on Canvas. Okay, so right now, you guys are doing a mystery unsolved. You are doing that. I will leave these up. So if you look at my Google Meet, okay, if you look at my Google Meet, you can see these words.